Son is the image of the invisible God, the one who is first for all creation. Because all things were created by him, both in the heaven, the things that are visible and the things that are invisible, whether they are thrones or powers or rulers or he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the one who is firstborn from among the dead, so that he might occupy the first place in everything. Because all the faithfulness of God was pleased to live in him, and he reconciled all things to himself through him, whether things on the earth or in the heavens. The word of God. Thanks be to God.
So you go to church with her, and now that they're on, but from her perch, she can also see who else is there that day, not to check up on them, but to observe. Because from up there, she can see an assorted lot of stressed-out workers and professionals, students with assignments due, and teachers who have to grade them at night, business owners flush with cash, and people living paycheck to paycheck. She also sees an assortment of people who retired from that stress, who are now busier than they ever thought they would be at this point in their life. She also knows that a few of those folks in the pews received bad news this week from a doctor or a boss or a spouse. She notices an older gentleman in the back sitting alone after years of sitting next to his wife. She's seen that more than a few times. So others down there had a great week, a wonderful week. One went to a wedding last night, a couple celebrated their anniversary, one had a child, another got news of a new grandchild. A few of the folks in the pews that day received good news from a doctor or a spouse or a boss. But most people neither had a particularly bad week or an especially great week. They don't feel particularly blessed or especially broken. And so, if that's the case, why were they all there? What united such a crowd on that certain Sunday morning? If they came to hear a sermon, they could have read it online later. And heck, they could have gotten probably something better, like a TED Talk. 20 minutes on a more interesting subject. So, why are you here this morning? Did you have a terrible week? Did you have a great week? Or did you just have another week? And perhaps you don't know why. My parents never quite explained why we went to church. They also didn't explain why we ate dinner. They just did. And ever since, I know I need it. I'm hungry when I've missed it. That's worship, of course, not dinner. Shall we never miss? And you might say to me, well, this is your job. You have to be here today. But it also, it's what gives me life. Or something like that. Because you know what? I can't really tell you much more than that. I know it helps me get through another week of the Trump administration, or any good or bad or indifferent week. But I can't tell you how. It just does. It's a gift. And you know what? Trying to explain it might ruin it. And that's my challenge with today's text. So there's a few lines, like, oh, I guess that makes sense, I guess. Such as the first half of the first verse we heard. The Son is the image of the invisible God. And that's one way to describe Jesus. In Jesus, we see a God who cannot be seen. And big word alert, that's called an incarnational theology. The theology of the incarnation. That's God made flesh. Jesus. We hear a lot about that during Christmas. But back to our text in Colossians, that makes sense vibe is immediately ruined by the second half of the same verse. And maybe it's not ruined, but it's kind of incongruent. The Son is the one who is first over all creation. Or in a different translation, the firstborn of all creation. For in or by him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, and it drones on and on. And my mind skips to the smells of turkey down the hall. That's because I'm not a particularly deep thinker. I mean, I like to think. I love to dream and imagine, but I'm not very philosophical. Or maybe it's that I'm not very metaphysical. You see, I don't even know which word I'm supposed to use. I am drawn to a theology that is concrete. Saying that Jesus is the firstborn from the dead so that he might occupy the first place in everything isn't the least bit inspirational to me. Nor do I think Jesus would have said anything even remotely like that about himself. Do you remember, he chastised his disciples when they were arguing about who was the best, who was the first, who was the greatest. And he said, the last among you shall be first, and the first among you shall be last. But more importantly, this text, me and my concrete thinking, this doesn't tell me anything about how to live. So give me parables about Good Samaritans and prodigal children and vineyard workers, and then I'm right there with you. You describe to me the kingdom of God as that realm in which justice and peace and compassion and kindness reign supreme, and I'll follow you. But you tell me that Jesus existed before all things, or for in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and I'll say, and so what? Who cares? And maybe it is of interest to you, and it may even be significant. So I like how Jesus seminar scholars like Marcus Borg focus on the historical Jesus. What did he really say and do? And yet there are many more ways than that to see him or understand him or know him. Human, divine, and Borg says in this passage, cosmic. Present at the time of creation, present in all things of creation, and bringing all things together. Some of you may have heard of Matthew Fox and his most famous book, The Cosmic Christ, and our experience of the divine. So the cosmic Christ is one way to understand a mystical dimension within Christianity, or as an archetype for mystical experiences. Fox says, I see the historical Jesus as the particle that light is, and I see the cosmic Christ as the wave that light is, adding that light is both particle and wave, just as Jesus too is both historical and cosmic. Deep stuff. Totally above my head, but some of you might know what I'm talking about. And texts like today's are confounding. But they have an important place in a faith like ours that emphasizes the practical. You know, what do I do to do good? Marcus Borg says the significance of texts like these is how Jesus transcends historical life. And when you put it that way, I agree. I appreciate critiques that Western culture domesticates Jesus into someone or something we can understand, confining him to the limits of our experience and making him agree with our economic and political instincts. It is important that mystery is given proper respect because that which cannot be explained is vital to a faith that is alive. That which cannot be explained is vital to a living faith. But sometimes too many explanations can ruin things. That's how this text feels to me. It tries really hard, really hard to say something important. But at the same time, it also reminds me that our faith is more than doing good and living right. Our faith is also about an encounter with a transcendent God. A God we can't fully understand or completely comprehend, but who we can glimpse in Jesus, one image of the invisible God. Now, one image, not the only image. So I come back to the question, why are you here this morning? Perhaps you wouldn't say it like this, but the cosmic Christ may be one reason. I mean, perhaps you chose to come. Or perhaps something within you when you awoke today said, I need to go there. Something you can't quite explain but compelled you today. And yet, did you just come for a TED Talk? Or for a gathering of community, singing and praying and everything else that transcends doing good and living right into an experience of unity? Unity feels good in a world as divided as ours is today. Doesn't unity feel good?
Yes, it does.
And unity is that hope of this divided world. The unity of we, who are an assorted lot of stressed out workers and professionals, students with assignments due, and teachers who have to grade them at night, and business owners flushed with cash, and people living paycheck to paycheck, and retirees with very busy lives. There is something cosmic in our being here today, drawn together by God or Jesus or Spirit or at least something bigger than ourselves that unites us and helps us get through the next terrible, great, or completely ordinary week. Now, how? I don't want to do like the letter to the Colossians did and use explanations that ruin the mystery. Things can be ruined with too many explanations. So I say, simply, for this experience, I am thankful today. But I will admit, so later in chapter 3, fortunately, he does get a little more practical. Back to, what do I do? It says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another. And if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, you must also forgive. And above all, clothe yourselves with love. Love binds everything together in perfect harmony. So as you wait later in a long line down to go downstairs to eat a feast, and you're standing, not looking at anyone, sort of down like this, I want to invite you to talk to the people around you about why you are here today. Tell someone you don't know what drew you or compelled you or brought you back here again today. Now, if you feel that you're going to ruin the experience by trying to explain too much of it, you can simply say, for whatever reason we are together, I'm grateful to be here with you today.